Thanks everybody for joining in. A pleasure to have you all on this Hyreo Rise series of webinar. Today we've got a very interesting topic in terms of looking at 2023-24. It's the start of a new financial year coming up. We thought we'll look at it in terms of what do our HR leaders think about the year that is coming through. Before we get started, I'll introduce myself. My name is Arun. I'm one of the founders of Hyreo, and as a company, Hyreo is focused on helping organizations build great relationships as they're hiring them to become part of the organization. In the last 2 or 3 years, probably the industry as such, and all of us went through a huge amount of transformation of all sorts. We had businesses slowing down, then you had huge peak in demand, technology being adopted in a very rapid pace. As we speak now, there is still an uncertainty that is looming around a potential slowdown probably coming up in the coming quarter. So I think the last 2 or 3 years, at least in the last 20 years of my career, I've seen the dramatic amount of change that can possibly squeeze in a 2 or 3 year time frame frightening. So, all of this change also led to, redesign of a lot of things. In terms of HR, we looked at what work is being delivered. What is the workforce really that we're talking about? We also are looking at what is the workplace going to look like. So it'll be an interesting conversation today. I'll dive more into what we will cover in the next hour. So before that, I want to introduce our panel today. I've got Sumanth Naik, who is the CHRO of Society Generale Solution Center based out of Bangalore. Comes with around 25 years in the industry, has played both a technologist role as well as an HR leader role. Somebody I've known personally for a long time, great person to work with. But Sumanth, I would love to have you give a very short intro about yourself, and then we move to Venka for an introduction.
Thanks, Arun. Good afternoon, everyone, and pleasure to be here. Yes, about me, been in the industry for as long, and it's been an interesting journey over the last 8 years since I moved from the IT, the delivery side, into HR. And it's one of my beliefs saying that you don't need to change an organization all the time to find an opportunity. You might as well get the opportunity within. And so far, my beliefs have held true. So hoping for a longer similar belief in the future. Thanks, Arun.
Thank you so much, Sumanth, for joining us. Also a pleasure to welcome you, Venka. Thank you so much for joining the session today. He heads HR for Coforge, based out of Hyderabad. I think one of those true real HR practitioners that I've seen who stands by the word that he usually has very strong opinions about HR and what HR leaders should be doing. Thank you so much, Venka, for joining in. A quick introduction from your side, please.
Thanks, Arun, and it was a pleasure interacting with you last time when you were in Hyderabad. And thanks, Sumanth, for being the co-speaker today, and looking forward to listen to you. And all the good afternoon, everyone, those who joined. And it's a one is that what I would want to say that the pandemic has brought a lot of interesting things. And so after spending about 10 years with Infosys Hyderabad as a location HR head, and also global cards and payments HR head, so I decided that I was ready for another adventure in my career. So I took this opportunity and moved to Coforge. Coforge was earlier known as NIT Technologies, and sometime back we used to proudly say that our revenues were larger than Infosys. So then this is the again journey. We are going to be $1 billion company now, and aspiring to be a $2 billion company in the coming 3 years. And overall, I did my graduation in HR, post-graduation in HR. Then I went to Mumbai from Hyderabad in the year 1998, joined stockholding, and then went to IRS. Putting together stockholding and IRS, I spent about 9 years. And that is where everyone was moving to IT industry. So I took a break from public sector and moved to Patni and IT sector, and that's where my journey started with IT industry. And overall, when we look at this decade is going to be between 2023 and 2033 or 25 and 35, whatever we call it as. I think this is going to be a paradigm shift in the overall working culture itself. You call it out rightly that one is a workplace and workforce are going to dramatically change. I think this is the interesting times for HR and the entire industry as well. Because today I was reading something today in the morning in Japan, the first time ever in last 15 years, their increments have been highest in the last 15 years. Just morning only I was reading, and it was a surprise actually. And all the governments, all the industries, and everything is going through a paradigm shift, and the inflation is killing, and the cost of living is going up. I feel that we are at a time that a lot more things are going to come in our way. I think, as you rightly said, workforce, and the workforce are going to be workforce and workplace are going to bring a lot of changes. So let me stop it here, and over to you back, Arun.
Thank you, Venka. Thanks for the introduction. And I think the discussion today, probably, Venka, is also going to be around some of those key levers that we just now spoke about. But for the audience, so today we kind of touch upon 2-3 subtopics around this area of what to expect, around in 2023. One is, how do you build resilience in a very turbulent time that is expected? We've already seen some tremors in North America. We're seeing some bank-related issues. We're seeing stock markets that had challenges in the last few months. So we look at it in terms of how do we build this internally, and HR obviously has been leading that ever since, if you look at the time when it was called personal management to today, where it is called talent management to people management. So there's all of these things will lead to resilience building internally. We're talking about technology. I think pandemic led to a lot of digital transformation in the talent space. Are we going to sustain that? Are we going to look at innovation and bringing in technology more the way we looked at it 2 years back? Is that going to be more sustainable? How do we have this workforce shift and workplace shift? How is that going to sort of impact? So these are some of those subtopics we will try and look at, which I think is mostly related to the way we work on the ground. But let me start with the whole resilience aspect. I think whenever we have tough times, whenever we're talking about resilience, I think fundamentally it's about balance. You're talking about balance in terms of realism to optimism, balance in terms of running the business versus building in innovation. So tough times really need innovation, but innovation is a cost. So how do you balance that? So maybe I'll start it off, Sumanth, with you asking, where do you see HR playing that role of a balancing act? Both in terms of the way we are planning, the way in terms of how we're executing it, way innovation. If you're really looking at it in tough times, how was HR? Do you think in terms of leading that path?
Sure. Thanks, Arun. So I personally believe that as humans, inherently, we are very resilient. We don't realize or we don't appreciate ourselves as much, maybe. But a classic example was when the pandemic hit all of us, and it was a global thing. It was unprecedented. Nobody knew how to go about doing it. But you would know, at a snap of a finger, literally people switched from working together in a co-environment to working from home. Yes, it takes a period of time for people to establish and things, but very soon, and much sooner than what's happening now, the change to coming back to office is a different story. It's taking much longer than anticipated. But that when it hit, a crisis hit the humanity, I would say, there was that automatic reaction, and people became resilient. So I typically harp on that one, saying, when it comes to an organization, it's not that the individuals don't know how to be resilient, but then it's a balance that we always struggle to find as to what is the resilience equilibrium that the organization's priorities demand versus what the individual's needs are. And its classic example is the return to office. When the organizations believe in a certain way of working, the individuals have their own. So where HR, I feel, can play a role is to help bring these two sides together. If the HR can really understand the priorities of the business, of the organization, of what the purpose of the organization, and help understand the employees, the staff, to saying that how does it marry with their aspirations, with their priorities. It's not always easy, and it's not always the same answer or same message to every employee. That's where the HR will have to really partner, not only with the business, but I would say they will have to partner with the employees, with communities of employees, because each one's needs can be different, and help draw a balance there. So a very pivotal role, but I'm also counting on the inherent ability of every individual to adapt or to be resilient. It's a matter of finding a match between what my personal priorities are versus what the organization's priorities are. That's how I would put it.
Sure. Thanks, Suman. So I'm going to take this, Venka, back to you and ask a slightly related question. So we've seen, let's say, in the last 18, 24 months, what Suman right now mentioned, you had change in the way we operate, where businesses operate, where people work. And we've had our own learnings. We would have improved on that. We would have brought in new processes. We would have brought in new technologies to manage this. But in your experience, do we stand to be really mature in that sense, or in the coming year or in the coming years, we're going to see further changes, consolidation, adaptation, innovation? What's your take on how this is going to evolve now that we've seen how to operate? Is it going to further evolve?
I think a good point, Arun, and Sumanth started well on the resilience and also what went in the pandemic and how we are grappling with those things and what we have done well and coming back, right? And one is the technology is going to play a vital role, and things are going to change. Earlier, what was happening is that there was a cushion in the system that takes care of everything, right? And pre-pandemic and in the pandemic and post-pandemic, the whole things are changing. And where we started, you beautifully summarized three things, right? Work itself is changing, right? The work is moving from a role-based to skill-based, and that is where the skill level which is going to give a much more edge than the roles. The second is that workplace, when we are talking about workplace itself, right? Today, workplace is working from home is a workplace, and if somebody is at a in a park and trying to take the call is a workplace, and when the person is driving and taking the call is also workplace, and coming to the office physically and sitting is also workplace, right? And today the definition of workplace has changed, and anywhere, anytime, and remote working is established, and the hybrid model is going to evolve, and no one can take away the hybrid model. There's a second shift. The third shift is that workforce. Today we look at, earlier it was only the full-time employment which was taking the precedence, and now that there is a lot more things, the gig workers and multiple things are coming, and it become like the project tenure is getting is reduced big time, and it is coming as good as hourly projects are also there, that so that the specialist can be taken for a particular task and particular assignment and getting it done. So this is a one thing which is happening. Then what is happening, that I want to touch upon the extension of this. Where is the challenge coming? The revised business forecast in the last 6 months to 9 months, if we actually look at, and the expected margins in the business have forced companies to redraw their business plans and align their cost structures. And is particularly, that is where a certain, where the reduction in the workforce and that is happening in cohorts, and also that are mostly to restructure the workforce according to the changing business objectives. If you also look at that, the basic IT roles and new initiatives and anything else that in the automation and semi-automation side are also will be moving towards a kind of a higher risk. Okay, and if you look at the startups that have raised capital in the past and during the go-go days and of the pandemic and are blooming like anything, and now waking up to a different reality. where the next round of capital will be a kind of scarce, and the business case is looking tougher and tougher. That is what, as per my understanding, goes. And particularly the recent episode of Silicon Valley Bank, and if I don't know that the reading the other article that says that they're predicting about Credit Suisse again. So there are multiple things. These things come in, and already there is a strain in the market, and all these things will influence a larger change in the overall organizational dimension, right? That will also going to influence the change in the workforce dynamics across the organizations. So this is what the broad thing. What I see is that it is going to be an evolution, and it is going to be much more different than ever before, as I mentioned. So over to you back, Arun.
So I think if I was to summarize, you kind of believe that a lot of those changes that happened in the last 2 years are going to continue, but the complexity of how we're going to operate as such, is going to increase. You're talking about, business priorities itself changing because of the way market is changing, and that is going to impact far more significantly than, let's say, what we saw in the last few years. Although we created certain levels of inherent capabilities to run this, we still are going to be challenged further. I think that's a great point. And if I was to look at what transpired in the recent past, one major change that HR saw globally, in line with what business wanted. If you're talking about gig workforce, you needed platforms to manage that. You're talking about remote or hybrid models, you needed systems to run that. You wanted to hire remotely, you needed systems to stay connected with candidates. You're talking about workforce who needs to be digitally connected, and that led to a huge surge. And going back to what you said, Venka, in terms of the funding, especially in the space of HR and HR technology, was record high in 21 and 22 in the last 15 years. So that indicates that tech became a major component of how HR leaders were looking at doing this. Now we're at the cusp of another dramatic change that could happen. What would be your take? And I open it up to both of you. What would be your take in terms of whether you see this as a HR digital transformation version 2.0 that could be triggered, wherein be it cost optimization, be it time optimization, or be it delivering service to the business? Do you think tech and overall digital transformation is going to sort of help? And do you see that happening in the near future? Any one of you maybe could go ahead with this.
Let me take, and then Sumanth can add. Sumanth, if you are fine.
Yeah, please go ahead.
So I think you nicely summarized. And what is going to happen, in my view, is that there is a huge opportunity in the people space. And in the pandemic and post-pandemic, if you see, the investment that is multiplying in one area is the on the people side of the technology, right? And every organization is requiring some amount of innovation, some amount of simplification, that how they can bring the multiple things at the doorsteps of the employees, managers, and leaders, so that they, in turn, that will contribute to the organizational efficiency and effectiveness, as well as that will also bring the advancement in the customer support and customer delight, right? That's where things are going to happen. In my opinion, whatever I have experienced over the last 25 plus years, and what was happening, that on the people side of the technology, the investment was not happened properly. And coming to your point precisely, right, that simplification, the agility, and for example, earlier there was a salary advance where the employee was looking at, and manager was supposed to approve. When I was with my previous company, if I apply anytime after, on 31st, I get my salary, or last working day of the month, I get my salary. And then assume that if I'm eligible to apply on the 1st of the month for another salary advance. If I go and apply on my mobile, which takes typically about not more than 12 hours to get my salary advance into my bank account, which is much more faster than no documentation and no approval required. What it looks, right? What was my average 6 months take home? and what are my deductions and what is my gross salary. Basis that system calculates and system gives you a number, and that number gets approved. So which is typically about your average 6 months pay, which you get monthly, which gets auto deducted in the next month's salary. And the system also can analyze and look at what kind of other things the deductions are going to be there and things are going to be there. But this is a very simple point that earlier in the kind of era that where it was much more controlled and it was happening, it goes to the manager approves, and then it goes to the finance department, and it goes to the HR department for various things. Right now what is happening in the workflow, the simplification, in one button you just go, everything is there. You just go open the screen, you just say that you are looking for a salary advance, then you can specify the amount. You cannot increase the amount, you can decrease the amount. So thereby the system controls are being put in, the workflow has been set in, and you have the workflow. In the workflow, what will happen is that it directly goes to the bank. So the moment you click the button, it directly goes into your bank account. To your utmost surprise, and you see that the credit happened on the same day evening or next day morning. It means the downtime has been reduced. This is an example which I want to quote, and you look at in the future, these kind of things are going to enable the employee is not the current generations, particularly the Gen Z, they are not interested in looking at, when I am seeking my salary advance, why my manager need to know, why my HR need to know. This is my right and I am eligible, and you just give me. And you want to do, I'm not interested in your process. I'm not interested in what approvals you want to take. I am interested in, I am committed, I am giving my good output, I am in need of money, please help me. That is a simple request. And the simple request you want to know in a very, very shortest time, that you want to see the credit happening so that his needs are being met. Let us take back into the banking sector. In case that they need to take the same loan and they need to go through a lot of documentation, and they will have to pay more than 20% interest rate for that shorter duration, and that is where they feel very uncomfortable. And similarly, there are multiple ways that in the employee life cycle, there are milestones that are there, and each milestone that needs to be revisited around. And if we are able to do that, create from a design thinking perspective and crafting those experiences to the employees without compromising the compliances, without compromising the organizational requirements. You build in such a way that it takes care of the people aspect, it takes care of the business aspect, it takes care of the organizational aspect and social aspect. So this is what one small example which I would want to quote, Arun.
I think that's a brilliant example. I think it clearly shows where you really don't need to have too many checks and balances. Technology has evolved, business processes have evolved. There has to be a trust that needs to be existing between the employer and the employee. And wherever that exists, that maturity leads to adoption of technology, which can make it easy for adoption. And before I take your views, Sumanth, I also want to tell the audience that if you have any questions, please drop that on the chat window that you have, in the Q&A window that you have. I'll pick it up whenever I receive questions from you. So Sumanth, I want to piggyback on what Venka said, and kind of I know that SC as an organization has been like way ahead in terms of a lot of the the GICs in India in terms of adoption of tech, adoption of more, or I would say building teams which are doing a lot more business critical functions out of India as a center. So how do you see, be it on the employee side, be it on the organizational side, how do you see this digitization going to evolve?
Yeah, thanks, Arun, and completely agree with Venka's proposition on how technology can, and as well as the processes can be adapted to the new ways of working. So for me, the digital transformation, if I were to interpret it, it's also how it can bring a change in a certain aspect of an employee's current interaction. If I were to take another analogy or a illustration, let's say the career development, which is typically why employees join the organization to grow. Nobody always wants to keep job hopping. Typically, the career conversations will happen with the manager, HR is intervening, and then the individual is guided towards an open opportunity, etc., and hopefully materializes into a success story. Where I foresee is can the technology, and technology is just, I would say, the media through which certain things are enabled, but primarily to change the habits, to change the mindset. So, can we empower the employee to own his or her own career? Illustratively, can the IT solution be available, which when the employee puts in their skills, their past experience, automatically matches with the jobs which are open within the organization, across the organization, agnostic of the department, team, etc., forms a match, and if there is a good match, alerts it saying that there is an opportunity available, would you be interested? If not, also highlights what could be the skill gaps in saying that, okay, you today have ABC skills, but the future opportunity requires another skill D. This is the gap. However, that gap can be filled with this kind of a learning program, which we already have in the organization. So intuitively, the individual is guided, but at the same time provoked, if I can use that word, to saying, maybe I'm blindsided by saying I always need to grow. When I say my career has to grow, it is my manager's role. But if I open up the landscape, the horizon for the individual, the based on your skills, multiple jobs getting matched, which some of them I didn't even think of. It then provokes a question saying that, why don't I try this? And like I said, it either could result in a upskilling, or I directly applying for the interview, or even interestingly connecting the individual with some predecessors who have traversed a similar journey, right? Somebody like before I traversed my journey, if somebody I had to reach out to saying who has moved from a IT delivery role to a HR role. Is it even a done thing? Can it lead to a success? Or what is the quantum of failure? How do I reach out to such a person if I don't know as many people? Can within the ecosystem that we have within the organization, if I'm made to reach out to people and saying, Sumanth, you're trying to do something similar to what this Arun or Venka from your other teams have already done it, it helps me connect, it helps me build my network, it helps me. So pretty much empowering the individual to manage their own career growth the way they want it, when they want it, how they want it, albeit with IT solutions. So for me, the IT is not the priority. The IT solution is just the enabler, but the primary priority is to change the way of working, if I were to put it that way.
Got it. Got it. I take it. I take it, Sumant, as an indication that we will continue to build new models that are going to help such diverse workforce in terms of talent planning, or in terms of their career planning rather. And technology can be an enabler in that space, and technology would be would be that solution really that is going to sort of help us. But I'll also take a couple of interesting questions because that came up just in time. And the first one that I would take, very related to this topic, is, has technology helped HR professionals become more inclusive and fair, especially when managing a hybrid and a multi-generational workforce? I think my quick answer is yes, but I would love to hear from the panelists, Venka first, and then from you, Suman.
No, I think certainly that technology has helped. One is that, let us take back an example of what Sumanth had said. And for example, that when it is coming to the skilling and reskilling, and when people are being given the opportunity internally, the internal mobility, that, how people can move from one role to another, one job to another job. So how they can do that, right? And within that, earlier there was a subjectivity, and when the internal job postings have been rolled out, and many people knows that there was a fix, right? And later, when the technology has come, when the tools have been built in, what happens is that it typically gives you the wide variety of candidates who have applied, and who has the better skill set, and what would be the rating. When you have assessed that, how different people have assessed, how these guys have contributed over the last few years, and what is their aspired role, and how long they have been there with the company, what salary they joined, or maybe that what skill level they are in. There are multiple things that you get a wide variety of, for every position, you may get a bunch of profiles. And then internally you give them an opportunity to represent, and you interview them, pick the best one. The other people still have an opportunity to move to the other roles. So what happened earlier, it was happening manually. Now that digitally, then you see that entire technology platform is helping you to make them inclusive, right? The second thing is that you also have those projects which are available, that which are open and which were being listed on the your website, and that which is skill, where, what kind of a role which I would want to move, I would want to apply. There is always a saying that you don't require a best fit, you require a nearest fit, so that they can stretch and they can deliver better. So these are the things that always have enabled HR to make people inclusive and solve those, some of those structural issues which were there for a long time. There were several myths, right? One is that people were so busy, people were only looking at a 180-degree, not a 360-degree. Now what is happening? Your systems are open to and accessible to entire population, from your right from your CEO to trainee. The system is accessible. You know that what applicant is moving from where to where, what interests are there. For example, you require a kind of a full stack developer. How are you going to look at them that you may not have enough full stack developers in the system? Then what will happen? You already have those Java and advanced Java guys. To convert them into a full stack, what opportunities are you going to provide to them when you open that learning opportunities which are uniform across the Java folks? So that is the opportunity. How are you going to reskill, cross skill, and how are you going to upskill people, right? I think within that entire example, I think that inclusivity has improved, and in multiple ways, it's not one way. And technology is helping organizations and HR to solve age-old problems and a lot more complexities, and also find out the real-time metrics: who is becoming successful, who is not becoming successful, what kind of positions are getting filled, what kind of positions are not getting filled. And that is where things are evolving, and the decision making becoming pretty more dynamic and faster. I hope that answers.
Absolutely. I think you touched upon that right topic, and I think
Yeah.
it also kind of looks at it from the perspective of not just looking at only from an inclusion perspective of making the fair decision. But I think what you touched upon as a larger meaning to me, the thing that we are taking decisions based on data. We're trying to go with not taking very opportunistic decisions, but we're trying to look at it holistically. We're trying to have systems in place which will have data available for leaders to make a choice. And most importantly, this builds in transparency. Even those conversations that happen with employees become more transparent. And I think that's the third subtopic that we also had, in terms of when you have such scenarios of change and rapid transformation, there is that delta of confusion that remains in the mind of an employee. I was reading a recent Gallup survey result, which was talking about an employee survey that they did in North America. It's not an Indian context, but at least the survey found that 50% of the workforce are quiet quitters. 18% of employees today, especially in the technology space, are completely disengaged as far as the organization is concerned. We're talking about 32% talent, which is actually aligned to what the businesses are trying to do. And I know that this could be because of what has happened in the last few months, in terms of how a lot of job cuts and things like that would have impacted the mind of employees. But I think crucial in such times could be the way we build the employee experience, both internal employees or talent whom we are hiring really from the market, right? Now, in terms of how this operates, and I'll take this to Sumanth first, and we've seen this happen many times before as well. Where do you see that organizations should be how much of it should be from an HR perspective should be focused on the short-term aspect of how the business outlook is, and how much of HR decision making should be long-term? Building a company, building a workforce, a tier one workforce is a very organic journey, and it takes quite a bit of time and effort. So where is that balance? And you look at how much is short term for you and how much of it is brand and team building on that.
Thanks, Arun. So again, my personal views, how much ever we say work dominates our day life, vis-a-vis our personal life, right? Substantially. And hence, the place where we work, in a way, it's a relationship. It's partnering between two sides, the organization and the employee. We should try the best to make it happen, but we should also be cognizant of the fact that sometimes the partnering is not the optimal one, and we should not always hold it too close and fast by saying that how can an employee leave me or how can an organization let me go. I mean, those are emotions, but I think we also need to be pragmatic, saying that uh, first and foremost, both sides have the opportunity to demand what they want in their right order. So coming to your answer, I would still try to, of course, want to retain all my employees given a choice, and hence would have some tactical options taken care of. For example, I would like to hear from them as much as possible all the time, and that's where again an IT solution can come into play. Uh, we have a vendor, by the way, Infido, which helps us reach out to our employees on a periodic basis. And it's not just a chatbot; it has the NLP running on or behind in the engine, which also deciphers what the employee is actually trying to convey. It's not only the scores, but also based on their qualitative statements, it infers maybe the person is happy, unhappy, or is dissatisfied with certain things. These are for me near-term essential inputs to know where which population, which corner, which team might be, as of today, not very convinced with the way they are progressing in the organization. And I would like to react to those as early as possible. So hence, this platform, the IT solution, is available for our HR business partners. However, this is not going to suffice or run us long. So further ahead, surely I would encourage every organization to have a focus on their employee value proposition. Undeniably, it is required. People many times lose focus or lose the purpose of it, especially if I've been in the system for a few years. I may start forgetting as to what is it, why it was put in place. At the same time, when a new joiner comes in, unless the person is onboarded, they may not realize what that EVP is, even the employee value proposition even means. But that is the long-term focus I would always encourage an organization to have, is look back where you come from as an organization historically, look as much into the future, and the future is many times dark or unknown or ambiguous. So don't try too hard, but at least seek inputs from all your employees to know what they want, be it through a survey or other kinds of collation, and try to bring in as much of the employees' inputs, of course, with market intel and other external factors. Build an EVP, define it, resonate it with your objectives, the organization's goal, purpose, and say, is that what you are able to even put on the table for not only your current employees, but your future talents also? And if the answer is yes, and I'm sure every organization can find that answer, stay true to it, believe in it, and then make sure it is never lost in translation. Like I said, the new joiner should always be onboarded with the intent, saying this is the promise we are holding on the table for you. At the same time, for our existing employees, it should not mean it was a once in a lifetime story. I don't know what it means. It should constantly be with them in their what I say the typically employee life cycle, be it a career conversation, promotion, team change, whatever else could be there. Even sometimes the exit, right? Many organizations lose focus when the time comes of leaving the employee. Why not give a wonderful experience for the person who's leaving? Get their settlement done within D+2. Give them a letter of thank you or whatever, a relieving letter as soon as possible. Let them go out with a purpose, saying that yes, this organization is somebody whom they would like to come back in the future if other things fall in place. So yes, long-term EVP, short-term look for ways to pick and choose, because you possibly cannot, especially in larger organizations, you cannot reach out to everyone all the time, but you should know whom to reach out to on a timely basis. And hence the IT can come in place. A good IT solution can tell you how to prioritize your near-term focus areas. Yeah, back to
Thank you,
you.
Sumanth. I'm going to extend. Yeah, thank you so much. I'm going to extend this with a follow-up question to you, Venka. I mean, if you remember, a lot of times when there is a slowdown, or when you have not so great a market condition and hiring slows down, or we're not expanding as quickly as we want, we kind of make a lot of our talent acquisition processes sort of in the back burner. We take a slow step of that, and many times we've seen that organizations' talent brand, general talent brand, and the perception of how that brand is perceived amongst the audience has a huge impact in the way we hire, in our ability to hire people. Now, Sumanth mentioned about making exits easier, making new joiners feel acclimatized easier, existing workforce to be sort of connected. Generally, all of this has a sort of impact on the talent brand itself, how we are seen as a brand outside, right? In tough times, and as we see in the coming few quarters, right? How do you see organizations are going to preserve this? How are they going to sort of make this more effective on the ground? Or do you think that maybe in the short term, you will more focus on business and less on building that talent brand?
A good point. I think, see, Sumanth nicely explained it, uh, other points, right? Talking about short term versus long term. Coming back to your point, I have a slightly different view on this. Today, what is happening? That you have a good business prospects, and then you are into a hiring spree, and then try to compete with the market and trying to look for a ready-made talent, right? Which is expensive. Ready-made talent is 40% to 50% more expensive than your in-house, created talent. Then what happens is that we want to assume that we went ahead and we have a good funding and good business prospects, and we go and hire people. Then second thing, let us say, look at the current scenario. Last 6 to 9 months, what is happening? We heard all the examples. Every example today is coming, except I think Apple. Everyone is started talking about cutting down and slaughtering. And everywhere you talk about all the big brands, it's been bleeding. And there are examples, right? There is an IIT guy who went to US, and who was being hired by Google, and he went to join Meta, and he was being laid off in less than 3 days or 4 days, right? And what did he do during those 2 days or 3 days or 4 days? All through induction only. It means he didn't even finish his induction. Then he has been laid off. Today, what is happening is that I think today the whole maturity of the process is being left to the volume and not to the value. Within the volume, the value got lost. So what we did, I give one of the example and then move to the other examples. One is, I was in Indian Register of Shipping, where I was heading the global HR part of it in Mumbai, which is a beautiful office in Powai. What happened was, I joined as the first HR head, and that is where the board had asked me to come up with a proposal, and I was working with the delivery leaders and trying to understand what is the requirement. We used to hire marine engineers, naval architects, and quality auditors. So went back and trying to figure out that naval architects, the country produces about 200 people, and out of the 200, 80% goes to the foreign class and shipbuilding agencies, because they pay better than Indian. That what is our success rate from IITs? That 4 institutes, right? Andhra University, Vizag, Cochin University, and you have IIT Kharagpur, IIT Chennai. These are the 4 institutes only supplies naval architects, no other institute. And on the other side, that when we want to, what is our success rate from IIT Kharagpur and IIT Chennai is hardly 1:10. How many people join? Even we select those people, we can't select everybody. And those whom we select, how many? What is our requirement yearly? We need about 50 odd naval architects. And we have an in-house 125 naval architects who spent about more than 20-25 years in the company. They are the pride of the country. What we did was we created a program that where we take people across the country, particularly from tier 2 cities, all the graduates, what is common in engineering, at those people who are BTech guys who can be trained as a naval architects, which we did. And that is where we went ahead and got people production engineering, mechanical engineering, and some of them from civil and electrical also. We were trying to get a bunch of people. We went ahead and did a all India test. There are about 30,000 applications came, and we conducted test for about 3,000 people, shortlisted about 300 people, and then finally offered to 50 people. Guess that how many people would have joined? All 50 have joined. What we have offered that time, I'm talking about 2004 to 2007, which was 3 years. And every year that we hired about 50 people, and the attrition was only 2%. And then what was the cost? We paid about 10,000 rupees stipend, and we gave them a free accommodation and free food. That was all about. And then after 12 months training, we converted them into naval architects. The attrition has come down. The cost is hardly about less than 40% of that. So trying to look at proactively and start building the talent. You don't require those ready-made talent always to come and take care of it. That was one thing. Second thing is, today what is happening, let us say in any business you take, on and average you must have a people leaving. And if you have that predictability index, that where you create that predictive analytics and trying to look at on and average what is the requirement you have and what is that the number of people you are losing, right? I'm not talking about new business, I'm talking about the existing business, which is predictable. Very well what kind of people you require. Let us say you require 100 Java guys. It means that out of that 20 people are leaving every month. It means that you need to build that 20 people. Why don't you work backwards? Why don't you try to create the 20 and who are actually required to be scalable in your current environment? So why don't you work backwards and see that just in time hiring kind of a thing, but it has to work much more. We have to work backwards. Say that, I need 20 people or I need 30 people in a Java or in any skill set, then work backwards. Many companies don't do it. Why they don't do it? Because our systems and entire, the practices have been built in such a way, we try to rush in the last minute and then try to create a risk for the business. And that is where we tend to hire. Then business will come back and say that, Arun, I need 10 people. They're saying that, okay, you take, then I need that, I need to offer them at 100% more. And okay, TK, go, because, otherwise business is at loss. Why we couldn't be able to think 3 months before? So that is what the model. I used to talk to my talent acquisition team. I keep telling them this point, saying that come back with a comprehensive proposal. Think a little ahead of times, right? And nothing stops you to be a thought leader. Nothing stops you to bring the solution that is much more methodical and much more long-term driven, rather than just a meeting for today's demands, right? And that's where we could look at it. Another thing is that today there are many places that what is happening, that client is reducing the spend and client is ramping down. That is where the organizations are also ramping. So what is happening is that that is where again that we are unable to look at which are the pockets where we can use within the organization. How effectively we can deploy them, redeploy them. How effectively we can reskill and upskill them. I think this is where where the gaps are there. I think we are not learning the lesson and we are not trying to fix those gaps meticulously. I think we can use the technology and design thinking, trying to come up with the solutions that are much more broad-based and much more futuristic, right? And which will reduce the risk for the business, risk for the society, risk for the people as well.
Got it. Thank you so much, Venka. I think that live example really added a lot of value there. And I think I see a question again posted anonymously where the question was, how has HR evolved to help our workforce change according to the increasingly cost-efficient business models and ensure that they stay motivated and innovative? I think your example of finding talent from not so some place from where you can expect that kind of talent at a very large cost bring them, train them, looking at it from a long-term perspective, I think would be a way you can contain cost and still be business efficient. I think that I take that as a probably an answer for that. I have another question from Sumit before we go to the last subtopic, which I take it. The question is that in the light of recent COVID, you had large multinational corporations providing higher than industry standard pay hikes to employees. Obviously, that was happening. However, as of now, as they've now started to lay off workers, there's a surplus of highly paid resources in the market, demanding 2 to 3 times their current salaries as well. As small and medium-sized enterprises, how can we remain competitive in terms of compensation and retain our current in-house resource? I think Venka again mentioned that topic in terms of planning, slightly lateral than what you should do as a just-in-time. Look at very carefully your forecasting, and like what Venka did, what's the real demand on the ground? That could be definitely a strategy. But other than that, Venka and Sumanth, do you think, of course, that planning aspect and looking at pockets of talent slightly different way? Anything else that you would advise Sumesh as a medium business, somebody who runs a medium business to kind of be competitive?
So my quick thoughts would be surely the gig economy, if it suits the business, because it might be a very generic solution, but based on the type of business, a gig workforce surely could be tapped into. It gives some near-term support while neither sides are committed. So I'm hoping the cost is still manageable. The second option I can think of is internal crowdsourcing of efforts, right? Again, how much or small or big the organization could be, if you have an environment wherein the colleagues believe in collaboration, believe in co-creation, believe in crowdsourcing for each other's work. It's a win-win again, wherein there is invariably a downtime in terms of one team having to deliver while the other team is really stretched and needs something to be delivered faster. So why not internally share the people? It also helps in the mode of reskilling and upskilling. If people are wanting to use it for live application of their newly learned skill, they get to work on a project for some time while the other project receives the additional bandwidth that you need. So not always need to go for a lateral hiring. I know the market keeps churning, but not only for any smaller organization, even the bigger organizations, I think, are slowly having to make a choice whether they pay money all the time or they wait for the tide to turn before they onboard people at exorbitant hikes. So lateral hiring is should not always be the first option. Internal mobilities, crowdsourcing, or if you can tap into gig, could be alternatives if that works.
Thank you, Sumanth. Venka, anything that you feel, anything to add on to that?
Someone summarized well, so we'll.
Yeah, I just had one point, Sumesh, to this. This was something that I heard long back from Sam Altman of Y Combinator. And the point was, if you're a startup or a small or medium-sized company and you're really looking at hiring, the best thing to do is not hire. Because hiring somebody always comes with a cost. So if you really look at your priorities as a small, medium company, that hire is really required. If required, gig could be an option, internal could be another option, maybe something for you to think. And now that we're talking about gig, I think the last one area, I think that most organizations have experimented, are doing their own ways of adoption to this gig and hybrid and super hybrid sort of work models that we've seen. I think one concern that everybody had initially when everybody started working remotely, you're 20-30% attrition, which means that every year you're going to have 1 out of 3 employees from nowhere. There's no in-person connect. We're losing out in terms of the organizational culture. New employees don't know that. We had our own sort of learnings on that, and we try to improve on that. But as this becomes more and more mainstream, and I don't see, as some of you said, gig or remote or hybrid, or these models are going to be further experimented with, and there's going to be more mechanisms that will evolve out of it, but it is going to stay for that matter. So how do you ensure that who we are as a company, for example, Coforge, you, Venka, as an HR leader in the organization, how do you ensure that who you are as a company is not diluted in this new model? What are the things that you've learned? What are the advice that you would give to people who are going to hire in that model in the coming years to ensure that they still know the culture, the value system, what we stand for as an organization? Venka, if you could take that up.
See, the one is that, that today what is happening is that the strategic planning, overall execution are going in two different tandems, right? The strategy is coming into the one dimension, and then execution is another dimension. In the reality, what is happening that some of the companies are able to manage well, but in some of them, what is happening is that it is not going seamlessly. In the systems thinking, in my opinion, that it is all right. It needs to be built right from a kind of an assembly system. What would be your requirement, and what would be your futuristic growth, that what is going to happen? How are you going to build your entire systems and processes and talent around it, right? And for that, you need to have a consistent, thought process, and the leadership, and also the kind of middle layer and the associated talent that is required. In today, what is happening is that today, with the high attrition levels, high expectations of employees, and also if you look at in the hybrid environment, you are not to see people. And when you are calling back, as Suman said, that we are taking a longer time to get people back. So what is happening is that the complexity has multiplied. Either we will never go back to a pre-pandemic level. We will never be able to look at a kind of a normal. It is all new normal that is going to be. Within that, how are we going to build our entire success factors, right? And that needs to be worked backwards. And that is where, say, that you look at your business, what is the current requirement, what will be the future requirement, and what will be the plan of action. And we need to work backwards, and making sure that with a kind of that 10 to 20% variable, that variance that may happen, and we need to be prepared for it, right? And you look at everything, right, that unless otherwise we build a good brand, we will not be able to attract a good talent. If you are not able to attract a good talent, then what will happen? We will get a mediocre talent, and we will be able to spend less, and then again that goes downward, right? The downstream impact is going to be there, either upstream impact or a downstream impact, right? And that is where that I think every company needs to be establishing their vision, mission, and values, and how they are going to work towards the future, and then invest on that every aspect of it, right? And if they do not invest on the technology, on the culture, and the kind of that the kind of talent that is required, the kind of values that are required, the kind of culture that is required, I think the organizations need to look at in the long term, and still without losing their without losing their focus for the long term, and just getting lost in the current chaos, that whatever challenges are there, one need to look at, and keep building towards that the realistic future, right? And that is one thing. Another thing that what I would want to say, that today everyone is getting carried away by the red flags that are being seen every time in our own life, right? What we do, we may have a beautiful car, new car. When it gets punctured, our motivation goes down, right? And when we are going and we are having a fun, we feel elated, and we feel excited and joyful. How do we manage during that red flag? How do we manage that green flags, right? And red flags and green flags are coinciding. But we only, when the red flag is there, we ignore the green flag. But when green flags are there, and we only look for that, what will be the next red flag coming? I think if you're able to get those identify those green flags within the work day, and the managers start nudging and keep mentioning those things as a small stories at a workplace, I think people feel much more excited, because in life there is 10 to 15% red flags are anyway going to be there, in workplace, in society, everywhere. There could be a rainy day, there could be a hot day, or there could be a kind of things that will flow in, right? In Melbourne, you see a 4 seasons in a day typically, right? You see a rain, you see a, so it's typically in human life as well, in the organizations as well. I think somewhere we need to look at those green flags to be and magnified and showcased as a small nudges and stories, so that you balance the, when the red flag comes also, it become lighter. So this is what message which I would like to pass on, and this is what I try to look at in my team, within my business, and that is where I go back I just say small. How many minutes you can give me, or you're already?
We're roundabout there, but if you can take another 30 seconds, 60 seconds.
Okay. So I went to one of the place, and then that where people were started talking, and they were so critical about HR. And I mentioned that, a small story that made them turn around everything, and they started looking at, and everyone came to me and they said thanks. I met them for the first time and traveled to a different country, and talking to them, I realized that what has changed in me, right? And I realized in the post-pandemic world, I started learning how to nudge people, how to tell small stories to the people. How can we make it little lighter rather than talking about HR, policies, business? Then, people are getting lost. The other last point I want to say and stop it, the attention span of people has gone down. And that is from almost some 28 seconds to 8 seconds or whatever. So today, what is happening that, in the digital era, people attention span is shrinking, and particularly in the pandemic and post-pandemic world, within that shrinking span, how can we create that positive nudges and magnify those green flags is going to be the way forward, in my opinion. I think that is where we can solve many problems.
Got it, Venka. I'm, thank you so much, Venka. I think that's the interest of time, I'm stopping it here. There are a few more questions that came up in the box. What we'll try and do is we'll try and get it answered by our panelists and get back to you. But I think the interesting part of today is we started off with Sumanth, you commenting about humans being resilient. We are closing the discussion today saying that from Venka that, let's focus on the greens and put more nudges for the greens. So I think no matter how, it's going to be high tumultuous it could be, I think end of the day, if you focus on the right positive message, humans are resilient and it'll come positive on the other side. Thank you everybody for joining the session. A pleasure to have you both, Venka and Sumanth, today on the session. We look forward to such webinars in the future, and would love to have you join in future ones.
Thanks, Venka. Thanks, Arun.
Thank you so much, Arun, for bringing us together. Thanks, Sumanth and Chitra. I really enjoyed, and I'm sure thanks to all the audience.
Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone.